Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Kieran Singer here at Undead Storyteller bringing you a solo story today. Apologies for my latest extended absence. I don't think I mentioned that in the Washington DC intro. I have returned however and am once again planning out new content for you all to start enjoying with today's video. Well, not today's video, obviously, but this is one of them. Anyhow, today's story, a solo story, is the account of one person's time spent growing up in a haunted house in the UK. Before we launch into it, I just wanted to remind everyone quickly of the awesome project that I've got going on, the installments of which are available in membership exclusives. If you like dark fantasy, dark romance, dystopian thrillers packed with action and adventure, then this series is for you. It is an ongoing work in progress and will be published to Amazon later in book format as well, so stay tuned along the way for that and pop over to the memberships tab to join so you don't miss out on those episodes. There are 2 available at the moment with a 3rd and 4th on the way. Now, without further ado, get ready to embrace the terror and let's get into this solo ghost story. In 1981, when I was 6 months old, my late parents purchased a 2-bedroom cottage. It had been abandoned for 2 years and was in a somewhat dilapidated state. It had broken windows, holes in the floorboards, things like that. It looked like your stereotypical haunted house. From my understanding, the old woman who had lived in it previously had died, and it had been left to fall apart. Such was the case with a lot of old farms and cottages in the 80s and 90s. The cottage was around 200 years old, and was in a village about 8 kilometers north of Bristol. My parents spent nearly 4 years renovating the place so that we could move in. Until then, we lived in a flat just outside Bristol. While my parents were working on the house, they experienced a few strange encounters. Each morning before work, my father would drop my mother and I off at the house. My mother would take me to school in the village, then go back to the house to work as much as she could. After work, my father would collect us, take us back to the flat, then go back to the house himself to continue to work in the evenings. Many times, my parents spoke of feeling as if they were being watched, of knowing that they weren't alone. They would hear footsteps upstairs, hear doors open and close. My mother once heard heavy, disembodied breathing. Our family dog would also stare, seemingly into space, as if he were looking at something none of us could see. My parents didn't massively adjust the layout of the house as a later owner would, but they did add a 3rd bedroom and a bathroom at the rear of the house. That was my room, which had previously been empty attic space above the kitchen. I never liked that room. In the mid-80s, my aunt came to stay with us, and as her parents, my grandparents, were in the main bedroom, she had to sleep on the bottom bunk of my bunk bed. One night she heard the door open and close. A while later, the bunk bed started to shake violently. She told me to stop it, thinking it was me. When she realized it wasn't, that I was asleep, she shouted at whatever it was to stop. And it did. In the late 80s, I changed bedrooms to the front so that I could have more space. The rear bedroom became the guest bedroom. I was lucky enough to have both sets of grandparents. My parents were from the north of England and Yorkshire, about a 3-hour drive away. Every so often, various relatives would come and stay with us, usually on a weekend. My late maternal grandmother had a few experiences. Once in the 90s, she woke up to see a woman wearing what she described as either a Victorian or an Edwardian bonnet. The woman stood at the foot of the bed. She stayed there for a few minutes, and then she vanished. Another experience she had happened in 2001. She was washing up in the kitchen, standing in front of the kitchen window. Behind her were the stairs. She turned around and saw the faded shape of a woman's figure glide up the stairs, then turn left on the landing, going into the spare room. My late mother had a number of experiences as well in the 80s and 90s. She was in bed one evening. My father was downstairs watching the TV in the living room. She heard heavy breathing, as if from an elderly person. The next moment, she was being lifted off the bed and pulled toward the window. She was afraid that she was about to be thrown out, but then she glided back down onto the bed. As soon as she hit the mattress, she jumped up and ran downstairs to get my father. He ran up, and from what I've been told, he heard a loud sigh when he entered their room that made the hair on his neck stand up. Another experience my mother had was when she was lying down on the sofa. She could see through the next room, the little sitting room, and she could see the kitchen door. The kitchen door slammed shut, and my dog, who was in the sitting room, ran into the living room where she was at, frightened. My own experiences were mostly in my front bedroom. I remember in the 1980s when I had my bunk bed, which was to the left of the door. I was on the top bunk when the door opened. I turned to look, thinking it was my mother, only no one was there. The door promptly closed by itself. They were the type of doors that have a latch and button so that the wind or a draft can't open them. In the late 1990s, I remember opening the door to be hit by a gust of chilling air that came from nowhere. 2 nights after my mother's death in 1999, I recall a very vivid experience where I was talking to my mother. But to this day, I'm not sure if that was real or just a dream. I've never had anything else like that happen, not before or since. A year or 2 after my mother's death, my father experienced what looked like 2 orbs in his bedroom floating around. He told me he felt as if he were being embraced. Around May of 2003, my father sold the house and moved about an hour away, while I moved closer to Bristol. He got remarried in 2003. He passed away in 2016. I haven't been back to that house since.